Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the first series of playoffs. We're covering TSM taking on Golden Guardians in this best of 5 matchup, and we've got at least 3 games to cover here in this video, so let's just wrap up this nice little intro and get into the first game with some amazing music to go blasting along the way. So let us get into the first champion select of this best of 5. TSM are on blue side, Golden Guardians are on red side, and immediately we've already seen 3 bans come through: Olaf, Callista and Akali. All 3 bans are coming in, and realistically they're quite strong bans from TSM. Obviously they're banning out the top ADC in the Callista, leaving open, say, a Caitlyn for them to first pick. Olaf, very strong in the jungle, obviously. Closer can run this champion, obviously it negates a lot of CC. If TSM want to go for a very high CC comp, the realistic banning of the Olaf makes this a very, very strong interest for them. As for the Golden Guardian side of things, they ban out the Akali, Zillion, and the third ban they ban out in this phase is LeBlanc. And they're quite big bans, because they're banning out Bjergsen's champ pool, and Akali can be flexed to topside. Broken Blade has whipped this out as well, but it is mainly known for Bjergsen's picks. Similarly, with Zillion and LeBlanc, 2 mid laners. Zil is very strong for Bjergsen, he's carried on that, he got Player of the Week on that champion as well. LeBlanc also is a strong champ for Bjergsen. He hasn't played it too much this split, but it does allow him to roam the map, something that he's been doing quite a lot in the past few seasons, getting the rest of his lanes ahead, and it's very, very strong. As for the last ban in this phase we haven't talked about, it's TSM's GP. Banning out a strong blind pickle top laner is a smart thing to do against Hauntzer, who has relied quite a bit on this game plan for some strength, as he does obviously kind of get the just blind pick option for his team. They just pick him a strong top laner or a safe top laner and essentially use him as a pressure point as and when needed, and he's been very good at it. So we get into the first round of picks here, and we immediately see TSM lock in the ADC of choice in the Caitlyn. Something they've been playing quite a lot in recent weeks, something Double has shown a lot of interest in, as it's very, very strong. It's probably one of the top ADCs currently meta. Usually you spam out that ace and hole as and when needed, and you also build up a lot of crit with that headshot passive. Looking at Golden Guardian's first 2 picks, it's going to be the Morgana and the Set. Obviously they're denying that very strong bot lane option for TSM by taking the Maud for themselves, as well as obviously getting the Black Shield and a high amount of stun lock ability the Maud has. It's very, very good in their team comp, and what's more is you can combine the bindings and the the shackles from the Morgana with the Set's show-stopping ability to just take you into the backline. Once you're stunned up, you just become very easy for him to execute with his kit. Obviously he's very strong in close quarters battles, and is also a very, very good jungler. Now the response from TSM is to lock in a Thresh to go alongside the Kate, which I guess is okay. I mean, it's playing more for other lanes to get them ahead, because you're obviously not going to get through a Black Shield, and your death sentence and flays will just be negated by that. So realistically, Thresh is going to be looking to get his other lanes ahead by probably roaming and providing an advantage that way. Now, I would have preferred, say, a Karma, maybe an Enchantress into the Morgana, something that realistically doesn't have to deal with her as much. And as such, I don't like the Thresh pick. More so, I would prefer, say, maybe a Bard, something that can just affect the map differently to a Thresh as a whole. Now, the last pick in this phase for TSM is going to be the Azir, which is actually a pick that we don't normally discuss with Bjergsen, who's known for more the Syndras, Zoes, maybe even the Oris. But Azir is a control mage, obviously very strong control mage, probably even the top ones. Obviously you provide a lot of attack speed on this champion, and he becomes an absolute monster shredding up enemies. And yes, Bjergsen's done very well on this champion, but as a whole, I don't like it being the blind pick option here for him, considering the fact that he could go through a second ban phase, and realistically, Golden Guardians won't have locked in their mid. In theory, TSM could have prioritized their jungle and say gone for a volley or a Lee Sin off of this first phase, giving them a bit of an advantage against the set, aka securing your counter pick while you still technically can get it. Now, that being said, the last pick in this phase will be you Golden Guardians, and it is the Ashe. And as a whole, Ashe is quite good, I guess, into Caitlyn. Obviously, with the black shield, she's essentially going to be able to just walk up into Caitlyn and Thrashers and land the slows quite easily. Obviously, you've got your volley and your Qs that slow down targets considerably, and you've also got a hawk shot. And this is why I would have preferred the Bard from TSM, because hawk shot does the same effect in the sense of checking objectives, as well as the fact that you obviously can dissuade enemies from going on it with your full knowledge of where they are as a whole. And this pick realistically works super duper well, in my opinion, into this TSM bot. So we have a lot to talk about phase 2 ban wise, as we've got 4 of them coming through here, starting with Aurelia and Graves coming out from the Golden Guardians, and on TSM side the Cannon and the Echo gets removed. Now, if I'm TSM, you technically have a last ban in this phase. You could, in theory, ban out the Mordekaiser in terms of how they're going to actually ban out, well, pick these last few bans, but instead they go for Echo, and I don't like that ban too much as a whole, as it's not something that's been in the meta heavily for either of these two teams. Obviously, Set is most likely in the jungle, so Echo realistically isn't gonna be a jungle pick. Mid-wise, Demonte, yes, he could flip it out. Obviously, he is the guy known for playing assassin picks in the mid lane, but assassins in mid, other than LeBlanc, have very little presence in the current meta, and as such, I don't like that ban too much. Cannon, I get it, Haunter is known for playing a very strong Cannon, so banning that is obviously a smart idea, but yeah, the only issue I have is that Echo. Aurelia and Graves on the side of Golden Guardians. Graves isn't a pick that Speaker is known for playing. He's more kind of been playing the odd picks here and there, like the Volley Bear, like say a Lee Sin or something along those lines. He doesn't play carry heavy champions, and considering the fact TSM technically already has 2 carries and Broken Blade aims to more the carry style instead of the tank style top lane, though he can play both, realistically banning the Graves isn't too big of an option that I would have considered if you're Golden Guardians here, as TSM realistically don't have the need for a carry in the jungle, so that Graves ban I feel is slightly wasted. So let's send out this draft in style, and we start with the Golden Guardians picking up the Ziggs, which is as a whole kind of a very similar champion to how Caitlyn plays in the current meta. You have a high amount of poke and range, as well as the fact that you're very good at sieging with your satchel charge. Obviously you get the turret down low enough with your passive auto attacks being empowered. Essentially you can then just bomb the turret with your E, and there you go. It's your W, and you can win the game off of pushing lanes quicker than a Caitlyn. As for TSM's response, it's the Lee Sin for Speaker, who realistically could have took, say, a Volley Bear or a champion like maybe a Sedge to provide a bit of a stronger front line with the same amount of engage that the Lee Sin would provide, and as such maybe make this TSM comp work a bit more fluidly, I guess is the best way to put it. And the last pick for TSM in this game is going to be the Shen. And this is where I feel that the Mordekaiser ban for TSM could have come in instead of, say, the Echo ban. Or in the first round of picks and bans, instead of banning the GP, banning the Mord there and locking in Shen first pick. And that would technically mean you're giving up Caitlyn and Morg to Golden Guardians. But obviously you could respond with an Ashe along whatever realistically you want to go alongside her and have the same amount of pressure all the same. But yeah, I don't like that, well, how the bans for TSM have shaped up so far in this game. And let's discuss the last pick, which is obviously the Mordekaiser. And why am I saying that TSM should realistically have banned the Mord instead of allowed it through? It's because Mordekaiser is a direct counter to Shen. You essentially just put him in the Death Realm and he is unable to use his ultimate, he's unable to help his team, he's unable to get an engage with his E and taunt people up, he's unable to protect people with his W. You're essentially nullifying this top matchup for yourself and making it very, very one-sided as a whole. And as such, I like this pick heavily for Golden Guardians. And it wasn't harped up about too much in the actual cast of this game when it comes to Big Ban on the threat of the Mord, but it is very huge, and I realistically love this pickup for Haunter in that top side map. Nonetheless, that is me raging slightly at the drafting from TSM. Let us get into today's first gameplay footage where we're breaking down a team fight. So this plays kicked off with TSM controlling the top side vision and setting up for this Baron. We see Ashe's arrow go wide, gives TSM the engage signal with Lee Sin wrapping round from behind Golden Guardians. Now the goal of this flank is for Speaker to either catch out one of the carries, i.e. the Ashe or the Ziggs, and kick them back into his team, or allow TSM to use the Stand United from the Shen to provide a bit of shielding to the Lee as he makes this play, as well as taunt up, say, a carry of the Golden Guardians. Now, Lee Sin ward hops over the wall, and Stand United is cast onto him, thinking they're gonna go for the taunt option. But Lee Sin flashes and kicks the Ziggs towards his team, and this is where a bit of the issues come in if you're TSM. See, Lee Sin gets showstoppered out of this fight, and that brings Shen along with him because obviously the Stand United hasn't fully channeled and Shen's not in the fight technically yet. And because of that, there's 3 members of TSM who are in essentially trying to kill this Ziggs who's just been kicked towards them. But there's one big issue. There's a massive gap between the engage of TSM in the Lee Sin and the Shen and the TSM carries in the Caitlyn and the Azir. So essentially, Ziggs is able to land from being kicked and essentially get out of it without taking literally any damage from TSM. Because of this massive gap, it's essentially very easy for the Golden Guardian to actually take this fight with their clumps up. When the carries of TSM arrive, it's very easy for the Mord, who is right next to the Ziggs, to just jump on top of them and put them straight into the Death Realm. He chooses a Caitlyn, who is the main damage source on this TSM lineup, and that essentially means she's gonna die, and that essentially means TSM have no damage going into the fight, bar in his ear, who is just essentially going to be killed off, and as thus it gives over the Baron to this Golden Guardians lineup, and they go on to win game 1. Pretty simple play coming out from the Golden Guardians, but execution by TSM costs them heavily. So, welcome to game 2, and this is a fairly similar ban phase from game 1. I'm only going to touch on the one change that happened in this phase, and it was the Echo ban has moved from the second phase up to the first phase, and I don't like this. As I said before, I don't like the Echo ban. Probably Closer has been whipping this out and probably been using it quite heavily in scrims, but my opinion on it is TSM could realistically ban the Shen in this spot, or ban the Maud, and take whichever they leave up as first pick, and essentially it makes it very hard for Golden Guardians to actually respond and actually play around it as a whole, and that essentially does alleviate some of the pressure on the map that you're kind of causing yourself. And yes, this does mean that GP does go through this first ban phase and gives a safe option for Haunter to take, but it also does mean that there is obviously the Shen still available to TSM. As we look at the first round of picks here, yet again TSM prioritized the Kate first pick. We've discussed how good it is in sieging, but last game it kind of was doing quite well for them, but as a whole it may be very interesting to see how it does, especially going against the Morg again, who has been very strong for this Golden Guardians lineup. Obviously that Black Shield providing so much protection to the team, similarly the set, so the same few picks again. And here's the first change in the rosters in TSM's favour. It's going to be the Bard lock-in. First time we're seeing this in this series, and I like it. It gives a bit more agency against Morg, as it gives you a bit more trading power. Obviously you've got a Cosmic Binding Q stun, you've also got a heal in your kit, as well as a lot more objective control with that Tempered Fate and the invuln it provides, and it kind of evens out the Hawk shots from Ashe as a whole, and I do like this pickup more than the Thresh in this game. So we get into our second ban phase, and there's a lot to discuss here because there's a few changes to how it was done in game 1. Grades though is the one constant that we've seen in both ban phases, and it's being banned out here again. I didn't like it in the first game, this game not so much either. TSM's response though is the Nidalee and the Camille. So one top laner banned out, obviously a high amount of engage with that Camille being removed from the field would lead me to believe that the possibility of a very roam heavy mid is the option for Golden Guardians, possibly, if TSM are expanding it out. And Nidalee obviously is a very strong jungler in this meta. Obviously she's seen recent buffs, them Qs are going to be very damage heavy, and would work quite well with the Golden Guardians lineup with a lot of poke that they already have. And realistically, that would essentially mean that TSM are expecting the set to go topside, and then you have to wonder, okay, so if you're expecting set to go either top or mid maybe, why are you still banning out top laners and junglers, considering the fact that set was just played last game in the jungle by Golden Guardians? Do you expect them to change it up that much? And I don't like them bans if TSM are expecting. I don't like that Nidalee ban if they're expecting it to go there. That's my expectation there. Anyway, the last ban to discuss is actually a big one. It's a Shen ban from Golden Guardians. They don't want to run the Mordekaiser in game 2 here, as they probably have a different plan to how they're going to be rocking this team comp, and as such Shen would provide a lot of presence across the map, so removing it from the field is actually a big thing from the Golden Guardians to actually do. So last part of this pick phase is going to be very interesting. Ziggs once again returns to the game in the exact same pick placement as last game. Obviously he provides a lot of strength in the kind of sieging mentality this Golden Guardians roster wants to go with, and as such it's interesting to see how TSM respond, and they actually change up the top lane obviously because Shen was banned, and they go with the Ornn. I like it. Obviously it provides a bit more late game prowess, something that they fell off with in the last game and lost in the game, so I do like this pick quite a lot. And it's the return of Lee Sin. They obviously didn't see it have any issues, and essentially only 2 roster changes for TSM because they were forced into making roster changes. Well, Thresh wasn't banned, but they obviously changed up the roster by essentially one champion because one of them was forced into it and the other is they just want to change it. But it is a very similar roster to how they did it last game. And last game they lost 2 fights and lost the game off of it, and that kind of cost them that game essentially, and it was down to misexecution from poor timing. And I would say the Lee Sin play was partially down to it, but you also have to consider maybe they didn't have the right execution with how they wanted to play, and as such the response from the Golden Guardians is a global ult in the GP, something that was banned out last game, very powerful, and it kind of counteracts the Ornn by having a very strong top laner into the Ornn, something that can push, something that can get his lane going, and essentially put Ornn behind heavily, which is essentially what you want to do if you're Golden Guardians. Nonetheless, the drafts look fairly similar to how they did in Game 1. Obviously, Golden Guardians making some changes, obviously the GP being forced in because obviously it was left open, and TSM obviously made the Bard and Yorn changes, but this draft I feel favours Golden Guardians more because there isn't the threat of a Shen who can just come in and provide the shielding and also engage and be a lot more of a nuisance than what a Maud can do. A Maud can do, because Maud essentially there to take him out of the fight, and Shen's just trying to get there, and that kind of counteracts each other. So this game there's a lot more action in my opinion than what we're gonna see in what we saw in the first game. So we kick off this play with Golden Guardians with Baron, and TSM think they have to force a play in order to keep themselves alive in this game, and they commit 3 men to the mid lane with the Ornhorn and the Azerault used to kill just the GP. That means the Golden Guardians get free entry into TSM's base, and it's a 4v2, and Caitlyn falls, making it a 4v1 with Thresh having to try and keep his Nexus turrets alive. Tempered Fate from Bard obviously goes wide, and then it's just a bit of greed coming out from Golden Guardians as they start getting caught out slightly here. Redemption gets used by TSM to keep themselves topped up as the closer showstoppers directly into a Redemption, keeping TSM alive, and he kills himself. Then it's FBI trying to step into the loving arms of Bjergsen, who has his 3 Sand Soldiers up, and that is a big issue, because that essentially means you're going to die because he can just melt you quicker than you can pump out autos as an Ashe. And that essentially gives the fight over to TSM because Lee Sin, with his Sonic Waves, can actually chase you down pretty easily. And essentially the Baron buff that Golden Guardians had is worn off. It comes off all the members. TSM actually gets some pressure on the map. And here's the issue though, if you're TSM, you've now left your base and you haven't cleared out any vision. Thresh hasn't got his sweeper. Bard hasn't got his sweeper. There's only blue trinkets on your team as you pick up a kill here in the mid lane, but Golden Guardians can just TP in to your base because, spoiler, I'm going to play you spoiler, you've left a ward in your base and they're just going to go to it and end the game because they got all your Nexus turrets. Yeah, so essentially game 2 comes down to a poor clearing of vision by TSM, or I guess you would say map control. Welcome to Game 3, where we're actually going to see the most change up from either roster here, as the first ban phase is kicked off with an Akali, LeBlanc, and Aurelia ban from Golden Guardians, obviously new one there being the Aurelia, and the Zilean has been dropped out of their bans. Obviously Aurelia is a pick that Broken Blade has carried on in that top lane and been a very big threat, and considering the fact that TSM are on match point loss, it essentially means that Golden Guardians are expecting probably Broken Blade or Bjergsen to pick up a big carry champion in their arsenal and obviously go ham, egg and chips, so banning out the Aurelia is actually quite smart here from Golden Guardians. As for TSM, they keep the bans fairly the same. Obviously the Olaf and Kalista are the same, but they've finally cracked it. They ban out the Morgue. I don't like this too much, obviously, because it essentially means that they don't get to basically reverse how the Golden Guardians are picked, in terms of the fact that they could essentially allow the Golden Guardians to pick up Kate first pick, which realistically probably wouldn't be what they do. Actually, I do might like this more ban, actually. Thinking about this more, it makes sure that TSM aren't put on the back foot by essentially Golden Guardians saying, hey, we don't care if you take Caitlyn, we're just gonna pick Morg first so that you don't get the combo and we get the better trade in terms of the deal. And TSM obviously playing that quite smart. I do like that ban, actually, thinking about it a bit more. So, first round of picks time, and what do you know, Golden Guardians take a trick out of the TSM playbook, and they first pick Caitlyn. So, Golden Guardians is the first time getting their hands on this, and you'd expect TSM to obviously take the trade and go with, say, an Ashe for themselves in response in this first round of picks. But no, TSM go Set and Thresh for the first round of picks. Obviously, them two returning to the draft, first time TSM are getting Set in their hands. And it's also the return of the Thresh to the bot lane. Something that didn't work too well, in my opinion, for Treats' hands. I'd obviously would have preferred the Morg if they were able to take it, but obviously Golden Guardians aren't going to be allowed to get it in their hands because they have first pick in this phase. Now, looking at the second round of picks for Golden Guardians here, it is the Graves and the Tom Kench. They're playing this bot side map very safe, and considering the fact they haven't banned out the Graves, it means that they're just going to take it. It's something that I expect Closer to do very well on. Obviously, it is a very big power spike for Golden Guardians, having 2 ADCs technically in their team comp, and that will provide a lot of threat for TSM to actually deal with. And considering the fact that they've got Thresh, it kind of evens out the effectiveness. Plus, obviously, the Morg being down, there's no Black Shield safety. But talking about safety, Tom Kench, obviously he can devour you up, and essentially he protects people from getting hooked. That's essentially his goal, and he's very good at it because he's very bulky, very tanky, and very safe. So I like that response of Golden Guardians into the Thresh, and it makes it very, very interesting as the Ashe is the last lock-in for TSM. Obviously we discussed it quite heavily in the first couple of games, and yeah, realistically it's very, very good into this Tom Kench, I guess, because you can slow him down and stop him from running away with, say, the safe option of taking a champion with him. So second ban phase now, and TSM start to remove out some big ulti champions. Galio is the first ban here, and we haven't discussed him yet. Obviously a high amount of roam in this champion with his ultimate. He can just essentially teleport to his team, provide magic shield, and basically affect the map, kind of how Bjergsen would want to play, or say Demonte, who has played this champion quite a bit in the regular split. Now, the next few picks or bans here is the TF and the Zillion by Golden Guardians. They've put a lot of bans towards Bjergsen in every game this series so far, and they've obviously learned that Bjergsen's pool may not be as big as it should be or as successful as the champions that he has. He's only got a few that have actually won for him this split. And obviously with them removed, it kind of forces him on to say in his ear as a first pick in the second phase or something along those lines. But yet, they're removing these picks. They don't expect the set to go into his hands. Obviously it can do. And yeah, it's a nice couple of bans. Obviously TF, high amount of roam. Obviously for Galio's ban, you usually expect TF to be banned or next to it. And then the Zil ban, obviously Bjergsen special, obviously provides a lot of safety to a team. Revive, very powerful. And the last ban in this game is the Cannon. Very strong in my opinion, because Horta obviously rocks the champion quite well and does very well in setting up plays, and considering the fact there is no AP damage on this Golden Guardian side, removing that is actually big for them. So we get to the last 4 picks of the game, and possibly for the series, and it's Nidalee the first pick here for TSM. They've banned it out last game, they're picking up this game. Obviously their AP champion pick here, as it provides a lot of damage, high amount of poke. It's a jungle pick that obviously has a good roam game and can essentially affect the map quite early. Obviously with the ultimate being the Kuka form, you essentially have a lot of transportation, you clear actual camps very quickly, and it's very, very powerful in terms of the amount of poke and harassment this champion can do, as well as providing a heal, something that works very well. But guess what the response from Golden Guardians is? The Mordekaiser returns, and it's in Hauntz's hands. Very strong, very AP powerful champion, and something that TSM failed to deal with in the first game. Very powerful indeed, and it's going to be paired alongside the Orianna for Demonte as the last pick in this game for Golden Guardians, so TSM's technically saved last pick here for Bjergsen, obviously with Nidalee being in a jungle set, possibly topside, and Thresh and Ashe in the bot lane. But yet, Ori, very strong. Obviously, you've got a very powerful team fighting ultimate with Shockwave, and you can combine that very nicely with the Mord, because you can basically use it on the target that's isolated by Morg to essentially assassinate them as soon as they exit the death realm. Now, the last pick in this game is going to be GP for Broken Blade, believe it or not, meaning that the set is actually going to be a mid lane set, and I don't like this at all for TSM. Hands down, there's better options for mid lane, and the reason I say this is I posted a thing on Twitter stating I did not like this pick, because you're essentially leaving your Nidalee as your only AP carry. And you think the thing about Nidalee, she needs her spears or a trap to land in order to do damage, and she's very single target damage heavy with her kit, meaning you're essentially relying on a Nidalee to do any form of magical damage, and I don't like that, because it essentially means Mord can build armor, so can Tahm Kench, and realistically not have to worry too much about a Nidalee if they can just dodge the essential spears that are coming through onto them. And that essentially means that TSM have drafted a very weak squad. Yes, you could essentially build Liandry's on a Gangplank and get AP out of him, but it's not the same, as the damage can get highly negated by a Mord, by just him taking you into the Death Realm. It's very easy for this Golden Guardians roster to win this game, and I think this is the weakest draft I've seen TSM get in a long time. So the last fight I want to talk about is around this Ocean Soul Drake for Golden Guardians, and essentially what happens is TSM isolate the Golden Guardians with Tahm Kench on his lonesome. It essentially means that GP can get in the backline of the Golden Guardians and kill off Caitlyn. Once that happens, Tahm Kench is essentially free to die as well, and then it becomes a 3v5 in favor of TSM around the Cloud Drake. And at this point, I'd be looking at Broken Blade to recall back to base. TSM not starting to Drake up. Once he comes back with full health, turning and fighting the Golden Guardians, because Broken Blade had TP, it essentially means he can get back in, and that Drake steal would not have happened as the double kill comes through, Graves gets 2 kills, and then it's just the cleanup here by TSM, and that's the sad thing. They win this fight. They could have quite easily have reset or forced the fight earlier, and then made it impossible for the Golden Guardians to actually get that Drake. And I do not like this play at all from TSM. Like, the start of it looks very good when it becomes 3v5, but then it's just misexecution yet again in this gameplay, and that is something that haunted TSM through the entirety of this series, is misexecution, misplays after misplays, poor vision control. It's something you don't expect from the team that was contesting for second place / top place in the league, and then to end up like this, where you're losing to the team that's finished as your 5th seed, you're essentially throwing away easy wins. Like the first game, realistically they should have won. They misexecuted a team fight. That's how they lost. Game 2, they got backdoored. Thanks to what? Poor vision control. Game 3, they just get out executed by miscommunication, probably is one issue. timing / not using your tools to the best advantage. And 3, probably down to nerves. Like, we saw in game 2, I do believe, Doublelift going to back to base, resetting, obviously, to spend his gold. He returns back to lane with just boots. He has 1,400 gold in his back pocket. He could have afforded a BF sword on Caitlyn as a power spike that would be huge in laning. So essentially, he's wasted his TP. And he's then forced to, after a couple of waves, go back to base, buy a recall, buy it, and then come back to lane by walking down, losing even more CS and essentially getting put further and further behind. And that is something that you know is tilt. And TSM tilted quite heavily in that game. Doublelift kind of misplayed it a lot of this game. He's kind of... people see as the issue in this series was his performances on the Caitlyn as well as on the Ashe. But you have to then realise he isn't the only one at fault for some of the stuff that's happened. Like, yes, you could say a lot of the issues fall towards the bot side map for TSM, and you'd be right. Obviously, Treats got caught out a couple of times and was essentially punished for it. But you then have to realise itemization from champs and issues like that kind of made this game and series very bad for TSM. Like, they were dominating first game, then it fell off in the second game. They got backdoored after winning an amazing fight, and then third game, Golden Guardians just demolished them across the map, because I don't think TSM drafted well at all in all 3 games. I've said this from every champ select in this video. I don't like certain things in how TSM have drafted, like in the bans. I did not like the Echo ban in the 2 games. I don't like the fact that they decided to make Nidalee the only AP source of damage on this TSM squad in the 3rd game. I didn't like a lot of the things that I saw from this TSM, and it's nothing new. They've had these issues before. I remember in last year in regional qualifiers against Clutch Gaming, Clutch, who, by the way, Demonte played on, essentially played the style of forcing plays at 8 minutes around Herald, forcing you to either respond or you lose basically the game off of it. And TSM could not react. They allowed Huni to get his basically big boy carries every single game. They did not ban him. Ornn was allowed to be played, TSM's Bane, and essentially it was down to mis-execution in that. And TSM's playoffs for a few seasons / regional qualifiers, whatever they are they're playing in, have always faltered around some point or misplays. And it's going to be interesting to see how this team bounces back if they manage to against Dignitas. By far the weakest team to ever make playoffs, by the way. I do not rate this Dig team at all, and yet they're playing this well. So it's going to be interesting to see how that series shapes up. Nonetheless, that's going to be it for this video. I've ranted quite heavily on about TSM's bad plays, and realistically, I haven't given enough praise to how Golden Guardians played, and Golden Guardians played quite flawlessly in that last game, and did well to capitalize on how TSM played in every single game this actual series, so kudos to them. Nonetheless, this is going to be the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like down below, subscribe if you're new to if you want to, and I will see you guys later. Peace out.